I am Scott Holt, the president of GFOAz this year. I am the director of finance for the county of Yuma and have been there for about 6 or 7 years. Sales taxes, which we're going to be talking about at this session, are very important to all of us. Those of us in the counties or indoor cities, they make up a very large percentage of our regular revenues. I know from the county standpoint, they are at least 1/3. So we, and that's a combination of both of our county collected, our county sales tax, and the state shared sales tax. So sales taxes are very important to us, and how they are collected and by whom they're collected from is all relevant. At this point, as you know, probably through the last session of the legislature, some issues were brought up with regard to the sales tax, the collection. Some of the cities are eligible to collect independently from the state. Those of us in the county, we are restricted to going through the state. But still, it's very important to us in how it's collected and those people, those agencies that are collecting the sales tax. Presenting this afternoon will be two presenters. The first will be Tom Belshue. Did I pronounce that right? Of all the times I've talked to him, I really didn't know I had to say his last name. I see him almost every quarter. Well, actually, every quarter. Tom is currently the Deputy Director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Prior to working at the League, Tom worked as the Community Development Manager for the Greater Arizona Development Authority, and he was developing the technical assistance and the community outreach programs. He was appointed the director of that organization in 1999. He's also served as the Assistant Deputy Director for the Department of Commerce, overseeing Community Development Division. Tom received his Bachelor of Science in Economics and his Master's of Public Administration from Brigham Young University. Lee Grafstrom is the tax audit supervisor for the city of Chandler. Several years ago, when I was with the in the state of Alaska, up there, the boroughs or counties collect their own sales tax, and we came down to the Phoenix area and visited several entities that were doing the collection of their sales taxes, and Chandler was one of them that we visited at that time. He's been employed with the city of Chandler since 1999. Chandler's Tax and Audit Division is License Division is responsible for the collection of the transaction privilege tax, liquor, special events, and theaters and amusement games. Lee is a member of the Unified Audit Committee and a UAC Ruling Subcommittee. He has served as chairman of both. He is also the current chair of the UAC Legislative Affairs Work Group and holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Illinois at Chicago and a master's of public administration from Arizona State University. I'd like for you to welcome both of our speakers at this point, and I'll turn it over to Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. As League staff, we look forward to setting up this conference and participating with you. This is an extremely important subject, and one that I know that you have a lot of interest in. And during the legislative session, right at the close of the legislative session, the governor, we're going to talk a little bit about this, but the governor appointed a task force on the TPT Simplification Task Force, and it was given the task of simplifying collections in the state, with kind of the target being, cities and towns, and with the idea that we're the ones that create the complication in tax collections. We feel like we've been able to open some eyes at the state level about the true nature of sales tax and about the collection and where the problems really lie. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and we're going to talk about ways that you can help us to get that message across, and also ways that you can help us to actually uncomplicate the tax. So it's a real pleasure to have Lee serve here. Lee, he works for the city of Chandler, but I want you to know that Lee spends a lot of time away from the city working on your behalf, and this is an excellent example of the partnership that we have at the League with all the cities and towns. Sometimes your managers may get a little iffy about you being gone because you've got a task from the League to work on, and Lee's going to spend every Tuesday afternoon, every Tuesday, at the League for the remainder of the year. We have task force meetings and work group meetings every Tuesday for the rest of the year now. And so I just want him to know how much I appreciate the work that he's doing, and he is a true expert on the code, and we have several also here in the audience with us today. So they're going to keep me on track because I know enough about the tax code to be dangerous, and but my part of this is political and making sure that we're protected with the flexibility that we have in the sales tax code. And so let's just get into it and talk a little bit about it. You all know what an important revenue source local sales tax is for us. It's doubly important because it is nearly impossible to get a primary property tax passed now, depending on where you're at. But I don't know of one that's been passed since 1995. And so it's tough out there to get one of those passed. And also, we have no control over our income tax. We do have a very robust revenue sharing program that we all benefit from, but we have no control over what the legislature does with the tax base or with the rate. And so we're kind of at their mercy of what they want to do. The one area that we have control over is sales tax, and so we guard that flexibility very closely. Just to talk a little bit about the model code for those of you who aren't intimately familiar with it, as I always feel like I've talked about this a million times, and then I hear from somebody, well, I don't know that much about the code, and I'm really glad you're covering it today. So I hope that it's not too much redundancy for some of you. But before the model tax code came along, all the cities and towns in Arizona had their own sales tax code. You can imagine that that's a nightmare for a multi-jurisdictional business, trying to keep track of what everybody's doing. And so in the mid-1980s, there was an effort by the League and the City of Phoenix to draft a code that was reviewed by all the cities, and we came up with the model code, which most people started adopting between 1987 and 1989. And as cities and towns become incorporated and adopted the local sales tax, they all adopt the model city tax code. There is some confusion that still exists out there about the nature of the model code. You do have to adopt that. You do have to adopt all of the updates that we send out. No, your attorney cannot make any changes to it. No, you can't adopt things that are in the uniform language unless you go through a very lengthy process involving taking things to the Unified Audit Committee to have them vet that, and then other tax-paying organizations getting a look at it. There's a big step. A lot of the flexibility that some of the old-timers are used to with the code, we don't have exactly that amount of flexibility anymore. If you want to make changes to the uniform language of the code, you've got a daunting task in front of you, okay? The whole idea of a model code is that, at least amongst the cities, we may be different from the state, but at least amongst the cities we try to be uniform. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay? So when I get calls from the cities saying, well, we'd like, the mayor wants us really to adopt this new exemption for this particular business in our community, we tend to be frowning upon that when we're participating in a task force to simplify the code. So we just need you to understand that we are not in a position of strength when it comes to the model code, okay? We are at the mercy of the state legislature, especially the way that is currently constituted. They do not like us, okay? I don't know if I can put it any plainer than that. They do not like the code. They do not like the fact that we have 18 self-collecting cities. They don't like the fact that we have the ability to set our own rates. Okay, they don't like any of those things. They would like us to be like the counties. They would like us to be totally tied to the state tax base, have a set rate. Those are the things that they want. So, in order for us to preserve this, we have to be willing to compromise and look at ways to make it easier for taxpayers. Okay, the model code is set up, again, with uniform language that everyone has to adopt, and then there are options that are set up in the code that anyone can adopt without any kind of special action by anybody else but your council. There are options that you can adopt locally, that you just take, pass an ordinance that says you're adopting that option, away you go. You don't have to go through jump through any hoops for that. And so the way that your code becomes different from another city is dependent upon the options that you've chosen within the code. Some of you may have a bed tax, some of you don't. Some of you will exempt commercial lease, others will tax it. It depends on the options that you choose within the code. There's also this little nasty thing that we call green sheet changes, okay? Those are unique to the individual city or town. That's text that's been added that is only contained in an individual city's tax code. That's the biggest problem that we have right now. We have been going out, and I've been very grateful for the help that we received. We've worked with 3 different communities so far, and they have all taken great steps to remove that uniqueness. There's some cities that have had definitions that were different from all other 90 cities, and they've gone back and removed those. So if you have unique language in that individual page of your tax code, that green page that's in the model code, we're going to be contacting you, and we're going to be asking you and your council to take a look at that and see if it still means something to you locally. For the task force, what we're trying to identify is those things that are different from the state sales tax base. And Lee and I have worked on this list, and we've come up with some things that we call base differences and definitional differences. These are not options, these are not green sheet differences, these are actual differences between city and town codes and the state code. The state does not tax advertising. It is completely absent from their code. We still tax advertising, and so that's one difference. It's interesting, this may be one of the instances in which the state gets back into the game of taxing advertising. This may be an instance in which they come back the other direction. We don't know yet, but there's been some intimations that that's how we may become uniform, is for them to join us and actually expand the sales tax base back the other direction. One of the big problem areas as far as differences is construction contracting. And we have set up the code to really be focused on those differences that exist between us or to try to solve the problems of auditing large tract developers, residential home contractors. The problem that exists in the code and the problem with auditing that goes on and has created some heartburn for taxpayers is actually subcontractors, your plumbers, your heating and cooling people, electricians, and how their stuff is treated, because a lot of what they do is service. They don't often have a lot of materials that are being taxed, and so anyway, there's some differences there, and actually that's going to be one separate working group, is going to be the issues related to construction contracting. Also, residential rental, we tax it, they don't. Many of you know that there's been bills that have come up in the legislature that in order to raise your rate on residential rental, you've got to have a vote now. This is one that's going to continue to be a thorn in our side. They would love to see us get rid of that, but we know that for commercial lease, we did a number of about 70 million statewide. We think that's a really good number. We got information from all the cities and towns. For the program cities, we were able to get information from the Department of Revenue and from the self-collecting cities, and so we know it's about 70 million. We're estimating, we haven't done the work yet, but we're estimating it's about 80 million for residential. So between the two, $150 million for us statewide is a pretty significant number. So we're going to keep working on that one as well. Real property and TPT licensing for use. Lee, I can never remember this one. Can you jump in? Turn on that microphone there and explain that one. You need to turn it on. It's on the top.
Hello. Hey, look at that. Check it out. Well, 16 years of college, and I figured out how to work a microphone. The difference between the state and city codes regarding rentals of real property, rentals of tangible property, is the state code only discusses rental or lease, and it does not include the phrase licensing for use. So there have been a number of cases where things have been determined not to be taxable at the state level because the lessee did not have significant control over the piece of property or something along that line. So they effectively said, well, no, these don't rise to the level of a rental or a lease. This is something less than that. That something less than that is a license for use. We tax license for use. They do not. Therefore, you end up with things like a Supreme Court case that says tanning beds are not taxable at the state level because the person in the tanning bed doesn't have control of the tanning bed or something. And yet, at the city level, we still tax tanning beds, which delights the tanning bed industry no end. So it's just another difference. It's another area where our tax code has a broader base to it than the state tax code does, which means we have more revenue at risk if we were to convert to the state version. So how's that?
That's great. Thank you. Food for home consumption. This is something that the state doesn't tax at all. Interestingly enough, the executive director of the Arizona Tax Research Association says that his group is putting together what they call a model sales tax base, and food is included in it. So they're pushing for the state to collect sales tax on food. Good luck to Mr. McCarthy. So definitional differences. City-based nexus. As you can imagine, what the difference is here is the state doesn't have a nexus issue because all businesses within the state, obviously, are taxed. When you're trying to determine where a business activity took place and whether it was on site, where the transaction actually took place, or from a warehouse in another city, those kind of nexus issues exist only on the city level. So that's part of the definitional differences that we have. Jet fuel is basically the one difference between us and the state is the state caps the sale at 10 million gallons per annum. So after they have taxed a specific entity for 10 million, they stop doing it. We don't. We get every penny we can. Manufactured buildings. This issue, the industry actually came to the cities and towns and asked, Lee, this is going to have to be another one that you walk us through again.
Okay, back in about 1994 or 5, the manufactured building industry came to the league and came to the UAC and asked, manufactured buildings are under construction contracting at the state level, and at the time that was the same place they were at the city level. What that led to was mobile home builders and sellers were having to get a license in every city and pay tax to every city, and they wanted to simplify things and say, well, this is really more just a sale of tangible property, not real property, so let's take this out of the contracting class and treat it like a retail transaction, which then meant that every time the mobile home builder sold a new unit, that tax would then go to the city that that company was located in, as opposed to the site that the thing was being tied down to. I've been saying the same thing, so I'm going to try not to say it again. Shortly after we moved it out of the contracting code, which would have been site oriented and made it origin oriented, just about all of the mobile home builders and sellers moved outside of the city limits. Not necessarily to get out of paying the tax, although that was just a lucky coincidence, but because they would end up with one competitor outside the city border who would advertise no city sales tax, and they were in theory losing their business to that person. The other thing is mobile home parks or dealerships take up lots and lots of usually prime land that's worth a lot of money, a lot more money in city than out of city. So a lot of them were being sold off, but they did not weasel their way out of the tax code and make themselves retail and then move out. I've said that a couple of times, and the president of the Manufactured Building Association cornered me yesterday and said that that's not really what happened, it was competition. So competition caused them all to move out of the city. But we have it as retail because they asked us to, effectively retail. The state still has it under construction contracting. The tax goes to the city where the trailer is tied down and attached.
Why don't you finish off the hotel and broker categories as well?
Oh, you wuss. All right, sit down. Here. Well, I appreciate the fact that you at least showed up this time, Tom, as opposed to the last GFOA when you just left me hanging completely. But hey, we're getting better now. So, okay. So the hotel tax, the state's hotel tax is based on is effectively a transient rental. It's only good for the first 30 days. If you stay longer than 30 days, the hotel tax at the state level ends. So theirs is more akin to our bed tax or transient rental. And it makes sense because they don't tax residential rentals, so why would they tax long-term hotel stays? Same thing. In the Model City Tax Code, we have a hotel category, which is for any length of stay from 1 day to forever. And then we also have transient lodging, which is the additional tax we put on for those short-term stays, which is your traditional hotel traffic. If we were to the thinking was, oh, well, they've got hotels and we've got hotels, so that's easy. Those are the same. We don't have to do anything with that. The problem with that is that their hotel and our hotel are not the same thing. So that's a big definitional difference. It's really probably more of a base difference and probably needs to be moved. But the broker category, we have an actual regulation covering brokers. What this means is if you are in a city that only taxes 3 or more residential rentals, but you go through a property manager, that property manager is a broker. Going through a broker makes every single rental taxable because they're in the business of renting property. It comes up a lot in residential rental. The other place that you will one day be hearing about it, if the audit that we started in 2006 ever ends, is the online travel companies, Expedia, Hotels.com, all those fine folks who effectively rent rooms at hotels like this one, and you pay a rate as the resident, and then they pay the hotel something much less, and the hotel pays tax on that much less number. Under the broker provision, a broker acting on behalf of the hotel is just as taxable as the hotel, and the tax is based on the price that the broker has negotiated, not the price paid to the hotel, to the sub. So we've got a very, very large audit that's now in the hands of attorneys, and so who knows if we'll ever see that again. But that's one of the major differences is we actually have a broker provision spelled out. The state does not have that. And then the ever popular, et cetera, et cetera. That's the other 200 or 300 little differences between their statute and our statute, almost every single one of which reduces their tax base relative to ours. I think I've only found so far 3 things that we exempt that they do not, and all the others are things they do exempt that we don't. So that would be your et cetera, et cetera. All right, where are we at here? You want to go back? You want to get back up here and try? Come on. All right. Good luck, Tom.
All right. I don't like him that much. Many small items have been removed, but we talked a little bit about green sheet issues, and we also are talking about licensing. Now, this has to do, each of you in the program city level have when a business signs up with DOR, they collect, DOR collects $12 from them plus a TPT license amount for you. It's between $2 and $15 depending on what you set locally. Self-collecting cities and towns, however, have an annual licensing, and they collect somewhere between $25 and $50. They do an annual renewal fee, and they also do some proration of those things. It was interesting, we had our first working group meeting yesterday, and it's called the Standardization Group, and we were talking about this issue, and I was very surprised to hear that when people started asking DOR why it's a one-time fee that lasts forever. How do they keep track of the businesses? How do they know who to tax? How do they know when businesses have changed hands? And I went on to explain that that's why we have an annual license at the self-collecting city level. And some of the private companies were saying, yeah, it doesn't say, how could you keep track of who's paying and who's not paying? It's interesting, the businesses are not there because they want to escape tax. What they want to know is that it's easy to comply with and that everybody's having to do it. And when they hear from the Department of Revenue that, well, we have a process for getting rid of them, when they don't pay for 12 months, then we pull them off the rolls. That was their explanation in the meeting. You should have seen some jaws drop in there. I was really surprised that they actually said that in a public meeting. So that was how they clean up their tax rolls. So we may see, I think there's going to be a recommendation from that group that self-collecting cities or program cities actually get an annual license. And what we're hoping is that they take that money and they provide you more services. One of the things that we're talking about is them getting you actually reports that you can use. So, and I see a lot of shaking of heads out there. I think that you would love it if what you got from them actually balanced against what they show that each individual company is paying and what you get in a lump sum. If you could make that balance, I know that would make you happy too. So those are the things that we're hoping, is that by increasing that, making it an annual amount, then they can dedicate some of that money to some of the things that we want. Also, wanted to talk about some of the things we're doing with options. There are some cities or some options that are just being used by one city, maybe a handful of cities. We're taking a look at getting rid of those. We've had a lot of success with that too. You know that we have the whole model local option thing, and I'm not going to get Lee back up here to explain the difference between. I don't really see any. He says there is, but we're going to go to one listing of options, and they're all going to be numbered. That's going to be one of the steps that we take to, and we're going to get rid of a whole number of them. And then we also have multiple variations. For example, we're also looking at residential rental. Some of you have one, some of you have two, some of you have three. You have to have three to be in the business. We're thinking that to make everything easier, we're going to go to one, and you're all going to be forced to do that. So don't come running up here and say, my council's never going to pass that. We're going to do it for your council. We're going to help you out with that, and you'll all be doing one, and it'll be wonderful, and everybody will be on the same program. And then renumber and reorganize, which we already went through. The task force was set up by an executive order. We have people that are representing business. We are having people that represent tax-paying advocates. We have people that represent cities and towns. Miguel Taposta from the city of Phoenix. We also have John Olson, who's in the audience, from the town of Gilbert, who's representing program communities. I sit on the task force, and it's being run by Michael Hunter, who is an advisor to Governor Brewer. He's her advisor on budget and finance issues. And we were a little worried when this came out, exactly what the direction that it was going. But it was really good to see that the people who are on the task force have a technical background. They're not political in nature, and there were a lot of political types that wanted to be on that task force, and many of them in the audience making a lot of noise. So it's a good thing. I want cities and towns not to be panicked about this. I don't want you to be worried that this is the TPT preemption task force. It's not. That is not what's going on here. I really believe that the recommendations are going to be ones that we can live with. If there's a lot of pushback from us, I think they're going to skip over that. They want this to be a win for the governor. In order for it to be a win for the governor, everybody has to be satisfied that the recommendations that we came up with is something that everyone can live with. So we're trying to educate people. Don't get panicked about what's going on here. We need to simplify the code, make it easier to comply with what we talked about, and our recommendations have to be put in by December. We're having 3 working groups. There's what we call the state and the local standardization workforce. This one is talking about how we standardize the way that business is conducted, with the state and localities. And the reason we like the word standardization is it just doesn't mean that the cities are being preempted. It means that the state may come our way and we may move the state's way, just depending on what makes more sense. So, and that got repeated over and over again yesterday. And so I really think that that's the direction they're moving in. They're also going to have one on online retail. I'll talk a little bit more about online retail in just a second, but they're moving in that direction for online retail. That is going to be another very popular working group. There's a lot of angst out there with the brick and mortar folks locally about what's going on with folks like Amazon and eBay. Right now, there is a bill in the Senate back in Washington, D.C. that the National League of Cities is supporting. And the idea is that you don't have to be part of the streamlined sales tax program, but you do have to have 3 things. What we're calling single administration. We think that what they really mean by that is a single point of remittance. And for those of you who have been following kind of what happened in the legislature this year, we have a portal bill that that Lee's going to talk about more in a few minutes. And that is a really exciting thing. People got very excited about that project yesterday when we talked about it, especially the businesses. Now there's some people with political agendas in that room that didn't like that very much. There's some with agendas that want to have all of the collection go back with the Department of Revenue. I don't think the businesses think that that's such a great idea. They like the idea, though, that they can go to one place, one interface. They can pay all of their sales taxes in one place online. And what's great about it is that behind the scenes, they don't have to do anything, and you each get your individual authority to collect your money directly from their account. And it's a very slick system, and we'll roll out more information about this as it gets a little bit closer. Also, a single point of audit. We already have a multi-jurisdictional audit committee and a multi-jurisdictional audit process, so that is already in place. And then also there needs to be a single set of definitions for retail. The good news about, and this is another myth that we dispelled yesterday in committee and during the task force meeting, is the retail sales tax base and the city and town sales tax bases are very close. There's very few changes that we need to make there. So the good news is it's not going to take a lot of work to put us in a position to take advantage of online retail sales tax once they get it passed. Now the reason right now, if you have nexus with a resource center of Amazon or some other company, you can collect those taxes locally in your community. But for all of those out there that, don't have such a place in your community, what the federal bill does is it allows the transactions to take place in homes in your community where they're purchasing, and those items end up in your communities. You have an opportunity to get some of that tax. Everybody will be able to share in that. And so that's why the federal legislation is so important. There's some taxable activities online already, and we're using that aspect. We're telling Amazon we're going to go out and enforce those. We're going to start enforcing those, and we're starting to put pressure on them with the idea that they'll put pressure on Congress to get something passed on a federal level. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lee for the portal project.
It's beginning to feel like Tom and I have given this presentation, 35 times in the last 35 days. So, knowingly or not, he's pretty much covered most of my slides. So, but we'll run through it anyway, just for the heck of it, one more time. Why not? House Bill 2466 by Representative Rick Gray was passed last year, which set up the online sales tax portal. It only impacts the 18 non-program cities, and it requires those 18 of us that collect our own tax to establish a single website where a taxpayer can go on and pay all of their taxes for all 18 of those cities in one place without having to file multiple returns, et cetera, et cetera. That's the basic concept that we wound up with coming out of the legislature. The larger scope is it would be great if that would also be able to do licensing, and it'll be even more great when we force the Department of Revenue to also participate so that you'll be able to file for the whole state all in one place. But those are things to come. The program that we're working with right now, or the project that we're working on right now, we've had a couple of demonstrations from potential vendors who look at our timeline that I'll get to in a second and go, wow, why so long? The contract has to be awarded to the vendor by October 1st of 2013, and the site must be operational, up and running January 1 of 2015. We were asked if that was a typo and it should have been 14, but we'll see how fast we can go. The reason I say we'll see how fast we can go is it's the League, the Unified Audit Committee, the Department of Administration, and the Department of Revenue that are all working together on this, and I'll let you guess which two of those are the two that will make this take longer, probably. So, I'm sorry, I've been in meetings with DOR a lot lately, so the general concept from the taxpayer's perspective, as Tom so eloquently pointed out, they log in one time, they select the cities that they want to file a return, and they fill in their information, and it all looks like it's all one return, effectively. It's all just one form that they're filling out. They're doing one return, they get to the end, they've got a total amount due, they make an ACH authorization for that total amount, and then they're finished. Submit, and they're done. They've just now filed with all 18 cities by doing one process. One of the things that we learned during the demonstrations is that everybody from the vendor side was also saying, well, you didn't ask anything about automatic uploads. You should have an automatic upload ability too. We were just thinking, you go in and you manually type in your numbers and you go. And apparently, people like Walmart and such would prefer to just upload their data directly and have it all done like that without having to actually type anything. So we're going to be shooting for automatic upload for the large taxpayers. Now, so that's from the taxpayer's point of view. They logged on once, they checked off which cities, they filled in their information, or they automatically uploaded, made their ACH authorization, checked the box that says I swear, and submit, and they're finished. In the background, what's going to be happening, from our perspective, I really don't care what somebody wants to file for Tempe. I'm only interested in Chandler, so I'm not going to get Tempe's information. The vendor is going to take all of that data and those cities. We're going to provide them with a bunch of definitions. They're going to apply those definitions in the background, and what the background will do is the background will take that, feels like one return from the taxpayer, and break it up into 18 separate files. So Chandler will only receive the Chandler portion, Tempe will only get the Tempe portion, Scottsdale, etc. The vendor is going to have to create their import-export file in such a way that it fits the city's existing system. So go figure, all 18 of us are not using the same thing. We don't all have the same tax system, and even those of us who at least theoretically have the same tax system, Tax Mantra, not one single installation of Tax Mantra is the same, so they all have to be custom tweaked. But that's the vendor's problem, and the vendor says, no sweat, we can even handle Apache Junction where they made their tax system somehow. I've seen it, I don't know how it works, but okay. Now, so each city will receive their own tax return information just from that taxpayer with an ACH authorization for just their amount that we process with our normal overnight ACH processes. the taxpayer, like I said, approves one amount, but they're actually going to see 18 payments that total that amount at their end. So we'll have a little language that says, don't be looking for this number, look for these numbers. Hold on. So then the last point on here is the vendor will never handle any money. All they're getting is they're getting the data and an ACH authorization, packaging that out as 18 separate XML files that go off to each separate city. They don't deal with the cash. We're not going to be taking credit cards. There's no PCI compliance issues to deal with. None of that. This is just purely a list of data from one site to another site. No problems, theoretically. In general, this is a move toward compliance with that single administration remittance to line us up with that federal legislation if that should ever go through. It does not do anything to replace any existing systems or existing methods. People will still mail you tax returns. People will still walk in the door and drop them off at 4:45 on the last day of the month. People will still use your existing e-tax system if you've got one like we do. All this does is just create another additional venue for people to file. And more likely than not, since we have e-tax where we take in our own tax returns right now, we took a quick look at it. We've got about 3,000 of our 25,000 taxpayers are using it right now. And looking at the 3,000 names and what they do, the likelihood is that probably 2,700 of those people will still be using our e-tax system after this online portal because they only file in Chandler. So they really don't care if they have to go to the online portal for all cities or the online portal for just Chandler. They'll probably continue to file with ours because they've been doing it. So anyway, it doesn't replace anything else. And the other, when the bill was first initially thrown out there, again, as Tom was mentioning earlier, maybe we're all just paranoid in the UAC, I don't know. But the first thing that came to mind was, oh my God, here it comes, it's preemption. They're coming to take us away. This does not do anything. It's not even a step in the direction of state preemption. Well, we're done. And with that, we have... I have a few more things I'd like to say. Oh, jeez. Tom's going to try again. But thank you anyway.
A couple of the things that I wanted to add on the political side. One of the really important things that's going on here is that the taxpaying, the businesses out there continue to say to us that they don't mind paying more in tax if it's easier to do. Okay, and so what we're hopeful for is that all these changes that we're making will help kind of pave the way for us to see more revenue and possibly for us to lower rates. That's one of the things that they would like to see. Our rates, because of the narrowing of our base and other reasons, have really shot up. The other thing that's being talked about during this is what should be in the base and what shouldn't be. There are a lot of very high-paid lobbyists that were sitting in there yesterday kind of nervous about where we're going as far as getting rid of exemptions. If you look at the model code and go through the local and model options, especially the local options section, that is almost entirely exemptions. And so as we start to get rid of those, there are going to be people who fought very hard in the legislature to get that. They're going to come out of the woodwork. So anyway, the more that we can do through outside of the process of the state legislature, where most of that bad stuff happens to us, the more we like it. So if we can be proactive as a group in taking a look at what options we need, what we don't need, if it's an exemption, is it really something that's important to a business that's vital to our economy locally? Or is it just something where the mayor had a friend who, would have, liked to see his tax base reduced a little bit? Or did we have an audit locally and one of our businesses got ticked and so the council didn't want to deal with it, so we passed an exemption? Those are the kinds of things that you as staff can help us out with. If you just go back and take a look at your code. I've asked this several times now, and again, I appreciate those that have actually done it and who have contacted us and who have made some changes to their code. But go back, take a look at what options you have, take a look at your green sheet language, and let us know if there's things that can change. There's several of you in here that have an Article 7 to your tax codes. Most of those Article 7s have to do with what you're going to do with the tax. If you have a special tax in place, or if you have a higher rate, then you have an Article 7 that says this is how we're going to spend that money. What we're thinking about for those types of things is that the taxpayers really don't care how the money's being spent. That's for citizens locally. The businesses themselves, that's not really part of, they don't care that, hey, we're going to use this to fix the, such and such a place, or we're going to upgrade this system, or we're going to do these things with it. So what we're thinking about doing in those instances is taking that out of the code completely, having it be in your local city or town code, but not have it be part of the model code. So those are the kinds of things that would be very helpful if you could take a look at that and start feeling out your management and then your elected officials for a possibility of making that change. Some of you have charter issues with those things. Some of you, City of Tucson has gone above and beyond on this for us. They've removed several of their options and their green page language already, but there was one that was requested by the chamber locally, and they went out and got a change to their charter. ATRA says, we don't want to mess with that. Let's get the low-hanging fruit first. So let's go back and take a look at the things that, don't have votes attached to them. If there are things that talk about how the money is going to be spent, we can move those and take a look. And any suggestions that you have, don't wait for us to come around. If you have suggestions about how you can get rid of that green page language, feel free to give us a call, and we'll help you know what to do to make that happen. It doesn't require any great thing other than just passing an ordinance locally. And then we can take all of those things to the Municipal Tax Code Commission at once, and we can get those changes made quickly and move towards, again, more uniformity. So with that, be happy to answer any questions that you might have about this or anything else. I'd also like to open it up to any other things that maybe happened during the legislative session this year. I'm going to talk about that more on Friday, but if you have any specific questions, be happy to answer those as well. Come on now, don't send me away without any questions. I know you have some.
We would like to thank you for your attention to our presenters today. Our next session will begin at 2:30, and you'll be here in this auditorium or this room. It will be on professional development, getting a grip on negativity. And I think all of us have to deal with that in our working organization. So it should be beneficial for all of us. So you're dismissed until 2:30, and enjoy your break.